Begin the current Daf, Masechta Shabbos Daf Mem Vav. We begin on the bottom of Mem Beis, second one from the top of the Yamid. The Gemara continues the discussion with the previous Daf. Asher is co-sponsored by Kalzer and Cheskel, Torah Anytime, and Daf HaChaim. And we appreciate everyone joining us on Zoom again. Some ideas we're going to be discussing in today's Daf. We're going to be continuing discussing the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan as it applies to Muktzah, that of specifically a candelabra, and how that might be different than that of a regular lamp. And also relating to the opinion of Reb Shimon, three different contradictions in the opinion of Reb Shimon. Some important ideas that are going to be discussed in today's daf is what's called makeh b'patish, which is, this is just the hammer finishing off the vessel, which is malacha d'oraisa. When you finish, when you make a vessel, that's makeh b'patish, that's going to come up. Also, the idea about a b'chor behemet tahira, a firstborn kosher animal, which has to be given to the kohen. It's going to be important if it's unblemished, then it has to be brought as a carbon. And only when it's blemished could it be eaten by the kohen, and that's going to be important to identify if it's blemished or not. Another important idea is what's called kol nederes adas bailihi nederes. Whenever a woman makes a vow, she makes it with the intention based on if her husband's going to be okay with it or not. And also the idea that gimel hadyotis are sufficient to be mater and neder. Although we generally need a mumcha, you need a professional, but in case of a need, then 3 hadyotis are also sufficient. Also, we're going to be discussing the famous halachic concept of davar she'eino miskaven. If something is unintended, what's the halacha? Machlokes is Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says that's mutter, and Rabbi Yehuda says that is asur. And finally, we're going to end off with an idea that's going to take us into the next daf, which is called basis l'davar asur. You could have something that's not intrinsically muktzah. It's not a muktzah thing like a table, and this happens in every Shabbos house quite often with this exact picture regarding the candelabra, not this menorah necessarily, but on the Shabbos candles, that although the table might not be muktzah, but it's a basis, it's a base for something else. Or in this picture, actually, it's referring to the menorah, that the menorah itself is a base to the flame, which is a davar asur, and that's going to be the discussion at the end of the daf. So we begin in the bottom of Mehema Beis. We're discussing the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. The discussion actually was that the Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef said that Rabbi Yochanan held the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. And on that he says, said Rabbi Yosef, now I understand when he said Amru the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, he didn't mean himself like Rabbi Shimon. The Bnei Yeshiva held like Rabbi Shimon, he like Rabbi Yehuda. Abai asked, what? You needed Rabbi Yitzchak's halacha to tell you that Rabbi Yochanan held the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? What do you mean? There was a story with his student who the menorah fell on the cloak. He didn't move the menorah. Obviously, because he holds like his Rabbi Yochanan, who holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds you can't move a menorah because there's a muktzah. If you held like Rabbi Shimon, you'd be able to move the menorah. And that said the Gemara, no. Yosef said, even if Rabbi Yochanan held like Rabbi Shimon, we see how Rabbi Yochanan himself interprets Rabbi Shimon, a menorah cannot be moved, whether it's big, whether it's small, and therefore it wouldn't be a raya from that story that he held like Rabbi Yehuda. And that's what the last part of the Gemara we read, that the Gemara says, and what's the reason? Why would Rabbi Shimon agree that menorah is muktzah? Why is it different than all other lamps that he holds is not muktzah if it's not lamp? It's because Adam said Rabbi Shimon would agree that you can't move a menorah on Shabbos, and therefore when it fell on the cloak, it wouldn't be a raya that he held like Rabbi Yehuda, and that's why we need a Rabbi Yitzchak halacha, because a person sets a place for a menorah. You don't play around with it. That's something where you keep in one place, and therefore Rabbi Shimon would agree that it's going to be muktzah. That's where our Gemara continues. On that, Rabbi Yosef, he asked to Rabbi Yosef, wait a second, how can you tell me that's a reason why Rabbi Shimon would agree you can't move a menorah? You have the canopy of the bridal bed, which not necessarily like a regular bed, it has a canopy over it. A person generally sets a place for it, not any less than, let's say, a menorah. Shmuel said the following halacha. Kilas chasanim, this canopy of the bridal bed, as we continue to talk about memvav menav, mutter l'taisa. You're allowed to go ahead and put it up, and mutter l'farka, you're also allowed to take it down. And you're allowed to do this all b'Shabbos. Now, generally, the canopy of the bridal bed, it doesn't have a roof of a tefach. It just has like 2 poles, and you have another pole going along on the horizontal on the top, and then you have a curtain that you put on the top. So you have these 2 poles on either side, you have the oil coming down, and then it slopes down, which is like a triangle. Now, since you don't have in the top, on the roof, a width of a tefach, it's less than a tefach, it's basically hanging from, like, let's say the size of this pencil on either side. So it's not called a oihel, So there's no problem about building or destructing because the oil has to have at least a width of a tefach. So it doesn't have a width of a tefach. So you can put it up and take it down on Shabbos. There's no binyan and there's no steer. That makes sense. The problem is, as Tais explains what the Gemara's question is, a person sets a place for his bridal canopy like a menorah. And even so, Shmuel says permitted to move it. Rather, it's obvious that its kaviyas is not considered kaviyas. And so by menorah, it wouldn't be considered kaviyas. Rather, and the reason why Tais has to say it is because Rabbi Shimon agrees, as the Gemara says later on, Kuf Chav Gimel and Alv, that if you really have a permanent thing of a place, you totally kaveh makom for something, that then it's going to be muktzah. But here, how could you tell me the reason why you can't move a menorah is because, kaveh makom, we usually keep it in a certain place. Kils Chazanim is also the same designated place as a menorah, and still you see a lot of movie, a lot of put up and take it down on Shabbos. So besides binyan and stira, that's not a problem because it doesn't have an oil of a tefach, you still see it's not muktzah. So you see kaveh makom is not sufficient to say Rabbi Shimon would agree that it's going to be muktzah. So Ella rather, Amabai, he gives a different interpretation. He says the reason why that it wouldn't be arrived from that story, and Rabbi Shimon would agree that the menorah is going to be muktzah, is because we're talking about bishal cholius. We're talking about a menorah of sections. So what's the reason? What's the concern? Who cares it's made out of a section? It's because we're concerned that maybe it might fall down and might get dislodged, and then you're going to put the pieces back together again. It's going to come out that you're making a vessel, you're making a menorah. What's the problem with that? That's makabeh paters. That's making a kli. And because of that concern, that's why Reb Shimon would agree to this, that you're not allowed to move this, because you might come to make a kli. That's why he would agree. Says the Gemara, if that's the reasoning, in your Yechanan's halacha, that Reb Shimon would agree, so my time Reb Shimon Lakish the Shari. If you recall, we had a machlekes between Reb Yechan and Rish Lakish by a small menorah. A large one that needs two hands to hold it, we said everyone agrees that's going to be forbidden to move on Shabbos. But a small one, they can move with one hand, so that's where Rish Lakish says you could move it. Yochanan said you can't. But if you tell me it's made out of parts, so then what's the difference between a small one or a large one? If it's going to fall, might put it back together again, so it should be considered muktzah because of the isra related to it. Why does Rish Lakish say it's permitted? Says the Gemara, no, you're right. My chulius, what do we mean when it said it's made out of parts? It's ke'ein chulius. It's like a menorah that's made out of parts. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, it has grooves all around, which is similar to the types of leichters that we have, that it's similar to parts, and the one who sees thinks that it's made out of parts. So Hilkach, there the halach is like this. Now we can understand the machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Shlakish, and understand why is this menorah forbidden, even let's say according to Rabbi Shimon, and why it wasn't a raya that Rabbi Yechonon held like Rabbi Yehuda. Chulyos, if the menorah is made out of parts, it's actually sections. What you do is you stick this in, and you make it into the parts. So then, ben gedoyle, ben ketani, right? Whether it was a large menorah or a small menorah, asur l'talta would be forbidden to move it because these are sectional pieces, and very easily it could fall down and collapse, and then you're going to be put it back, and you're going to be over a makabeh paters. So everyone agrees, no matter the size, you wouldn't be able to move such a menorah. Gedoyle nami, a large menorah too, since it's the norm to make it sectional because it's so big. So there also the isbachitki, if it has the grooves, even though it's not sectional, it has grooves. There, everyone would agree, as we saw on the previous tab, gzeira atu gedel dechulias. We make a gzeira that because of you, by the case of the large one that is sectional, meaning, as Rashi explains, people are going to think when they see this large menorah, they're going to think it's sectional because the norm is to make a large one out of sections. So even Rish Lakish would agree it's going to be us, like we said, if it's so large that you need two hands to move it, it's going to be us to move it. Now, not like as we said in the previous stuff because of kaveh makom. No, that we said that's not enough of a reason according to Reb Shimon to make it asa. Rather, it's because people are going to think it's sectional, and that's going to lead to the problem about makabeh paters. Ki peligi, when's the machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Lakish is biketana. By a small menorah, what's called that could be moved with one hand, the isbachitki that has grooves. Where everyone knows that you don't make a small menorah sectional because it's small, you make it out of one thing. But still we have a machlekes. Marsa b'gazrina, b'yechan held, we do make a gezerah, because if we let you use a small one with grooves, you might come to use a small one sectional, and then you are going to have the problem. Marsa b'gazrina, Shlaki says, no, we don't make such a gezerah. We want to make a gezerah with this one itself. If this would become to confuse with a sectional one, here we know that this is not made sectional. Because you might come to use a sectional one, he doesn't have such a gzeira, and therefore that's a new redefinition of this halacha of the menorah. The reason why we said that everyone's going to agree it's us or even Reb Shimon, and why it's not a raya in that story that he didn't move the menorah is not because Kebei L'Malkim, it's simply because it's like a sectional menorah, because it has grooves, and that's the Machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Shlakish regarding when it's small, do we make such a gezerah? But again, that has nothing to do with the halacha of the general halacha of muktzah, and therefore it wouldn't be a raya that it's like Rabbi Yehuda, because it could even be like Reb Shimon. It's based on a different reason of, do we have a gezerah of chidki or to chulyes? When it's grooved, then you might come to confuse it with sectional, which is a different concern regarding makabeh patish. But this takes us back to the previous stuff. Okay, so this was all introduced simply because we had Rabbi Yitzchak's halacha that said Rabbi Yechon is like Rabbi Yehuda, and we asked, what, you need that halacha? Don't you know from that story? He said, no, that story is not a raya. Okay, that story even Rabbi Shimon would agree. Why? So the Gemara first thought because Kebei L'Malkim, the Gemara rejected that, and the Gemara says simply because it might lead to makabeh patish. But now the Gemara goes back to the original concept. Does Rabbi Yechon really say halachas like Rabbi Yehuda? Again, when we say Rabbi Yehuda, he's the more extensive, the more severe, the more stringent interpretation in Muktzah. But Rabbi Yechon says halacha is tam mishnah. We know we say this many times in Shas. Halacha is like, Rabbi Yechon holds, like an anonymous mishnah. Now it's non. We have an anonymous mishnah, Masechtas Kalim, that we quote on the previous daf, and therefore we're not going to go through the details of it. But the mishnah there says, Muchni Shala, the wheel of a wagon. So Bismanchi Nishmetis, if it's removable, so in chibala, it's not considered attached to the wagon, as we said regarding the laws of Tumah, they're independent. Veinim dedisima, it's not measured with it, because we said a wagon, it's 40 sa, it's not makabel Tumah. Here also, it's not going to be measured with it, it's not going to make it to the 40 sa. Also, ve'im atzelisima ba'ilames, it's not going to protect with it by the ilames, so therefore, although the wagon is, let's say, 40 sa, it's going to protect, but the wheels will not. Ve'in garin oisa b'shabbos b'zman sheyesh lamois, and this is the halacha we want to bring in. We said, and we also, that's the reason why we brought in on the other daf, you cannot drag the wheel on Shabbos when there's money on the wheel. Okay, fine, because it's independent. If it was considered connected to the wagon that we brought from Taisus, you would be able to move it. But the inference is, ha'ein Allah ma'is, and we made this deek back then also, and we used it to ask a question on Rav. And we said, oh, it's not difficult, it's a different opinion. This is exactly what we're going to ask right now. So he's saying, when there's money on the wheel, you can't move it. But ha'ein Allah ma'is, if there's no money on the wheel right now, shari, it's permitted. The avagav dabala ben hashmashas, even though the money was there, the whole ben hashmashas, it's just at some point in Shabbos it fell off. Then you're allowed to move the wheel. Wait a second, but there's migidis katzoi ben hashmashas katzoi l'kul yema. This is what the Gemara answered on the previous daf. Oh, this mission is going like Reb Shimon. Rav holds like we said on the other daf, like Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, it's migidis katzoi. That Mishnah, don't ask him, and it's going like Reb Shimon. The problem is Rabbi Yechanan rules like a stam Mishnah. This stam Mishnah, that's anonymous Mishnah. Who is it going like? Like Rabbi Shimon. That's not bothered by being Migdis Katzoi. So how could Rabbi Yechon say halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? Don't you pass like a stam Mishnah, which is like Rabbi Shimon? So Rabbi Zeir, he says, you're right. But it says, Tehei Mishnah Seinu. This Mishnah Masechtas Kalim regarding the wheel, which we're inferring that if the money is not on it, it's going to be permitted to move the wheel. You have to say it's talking about Shaloi Hayuleh, Mois Kol Ben Hashmashas. That no, the money was not on it, the whole Ben Hashmashas. And rather, your deek from the Mishnah should be, the reason that the money was on it when Shabbos started. But if the money was not on it when Shabbos started, then it would be permitted. But if actually money was on it by Ben Hashmashas, it actually would be aser, like Rabbi Yehuda. And why would we give that interpretation? The simple translation of the Mishnah doesn't sound like that. It sounds like as long as it's not on it right now, even if it was on the whole Ben Hashmashas. Now you're reinterpreting, you're saying the Mishnah means to say that, no, it doesn't mean that there's not money on it right now. It means that there wasn't money on it when it says you can't pull it on Shabbos, bizman sheyesh ala mois. What does it mean yesh ala mois? On the time of bein hashmashas, because the deek is, but if there wasn't money bein hashmashas, then it's going to be permitted. But if it's on the bein hashmashas, then even if it's not on it right now, it's going to be also like Rabbi Yehuda. Why are we making such a radical reinterpretation? That we shouldn't break the words of Rabbi Yechanan because he seems to contradict himself. He holds Stam Mishnah, which says like Reb Shimon. He says Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda. What do we do? So you have to reinterpret that Mishnah, that Stam Mishnah is also going to be like Rabbi Yehuda. That it doesn't mean that it's not on it right now. It means it wasn't on it by Bein Hashmashas. And then that's going to resolve the opinion of Rabbi Yechanan, which is like Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara continues to qualify the opinion of Rebbe in the laws of Muktzah. We quoted Rebbe on the top of the previous Daf on Amud Beis when it was discussed, does he hold like Reb Shimon, does he hold like Rabbi Yehuda? We had the contradiction. His son asked him what's with the unripe dates according to Reb Shimon. So now we continue with the opinion of Rebbe in the laws of Muktzah. Reb Shimon Levi says, Pamachas holach Rebbe l'Diuspera. One time Rebbe went to this place called Diuspera. V'hayra b'menaira, and here we're going to say this enigmatic statement. He ruled by a menaira, a candelabra, ki Reb Shimon ben Ner, like Reb Shimon rules by a lamp. Those are the words that we have the tradition that was said. Now, the following question. Was it one ruling that Rebbe had done? And what he was saying was like this. Hayra b'menayra, he ruled regarding the moving of the candelabra permissibly, ki Reb Shimon ben Ner, just like Reb Shimon permits moving an old lamp, where Reb Shimon's the more lenient interpretation. Yehuda holds not allowed to move an old lamp because muktzah machmas miyas. Shimon holds not bothered with muktzah machmas miyas. He says you're allowed to move an old lamp, which Tosfos wonders the way this interpretation, the way Rashi translates it, which Tosfos doesn't offer another approach, but it's interesting. You're telling me that, you tell me a heter regarding a menorah, the way Reb Shimon permits by a ner. Those are two different halachas. Why would you pick that? That's a question that the Rishonim discussed. But that's the interpretation. It's one halacha he was saying. He permits moving a menorah just like he's being lenient. Like Reb Shimon is lenient by menorah, so to over here, he's being lenient by menorah. So it's leheter. It's one halacha of heter. It wasn't discussing regarding the ner. He was just saying, just like Reb Shimon's a lenient opinion by a lamp, so it's his lenient opinion by the menorah. Meaning, Rebbe's lenient by menorah, just like Rebbe Shimon is matzah by ner. Idilmo, maybe no, there was two different rulings over here. Hayr bin menorah should be read independent, and then Reb Shimon ben Ner is a separate halacha, which is Hayr bin menorah li'isura. He ruled regarding moving the menorah that it's forbidden, like we said in the previous sugya. We said that when it's grooved, we say you're not allowed to move the menorah because we make a gzera that you might move a menorah when it's made out of parts, which that would be problematic because it's going to fall, sectional, you're going to put it back together, and you're going to be making a kli, makav b'patash. Then there's a separate ruling that he made. Reb Shimon, he ruled like Reb Shimon ben Ner by a lamp regarding muktzah machmas miyas, by an old lamp, leter, permissibly. What was it that he said? Says he might take a letter. It's not clear. What did Rebbe rule? Was it once teaching that he said that the menorah is permitted, just like Reb Shimon is lenient by a ner? Or is it two different rulings? He was hayr b'menorah, that it's aser, and then, period, ki Reb Shimon ben Ner, period. And he was ruled a different ruling, like Reb Shimon regarding the lamp, that there's no problem with muktzah machmas miyas, like that of Reb Shimon. Now, the Gemara continues, different stories with different amiram in practice regarding this law of muktzah that we're discussing in the previous daf regarding a lamp, which this was the previous Mishnah. We had this machlekes, could you move a ner chadash only, or even ner yashin? That was machlekes between Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda. So the Gemara brings a Reb Malkia, iklul bei Reb Simloi. Reb Malkia went to the house of Reb Simloi, v'tiltul shraga, and he moved a lamp that had gone out, which that's like Reb Shimon. But the ikbid Reb Simloi was particularly bothered by that because he had like Reb Yehuda that no, there is a problem about muktzah machmas iser, and therefore, since it was already lit from before Shabbos, not like Reb Shimon. So to another story, Reb Yisi Gilei Law. Ikla la'asr Reb Yisi Reb Chanina. And Tiltal Shraga, he moved the lamp. V'ik Reb Yisi Reb Chanina, he was also particular because like Reb Yehuda, who holds, no, you're not allowed to move an old lamp, you're not allowed to move a lamp that was lit from before Shabbos, it's considered muktzah. So to the Gemara brings Reb Avo. Ki ikla la'asr Reb Shimon Levi, so this is like as we have over here. When he went to the place of Reb Shimon Levi, have metaltal Shraga. So then he would move a lamp, which is like Reb Shimon. Ki iklu asad Rabbi Yechanan, when he went to the place of Rabbi Yechanan, lo yav metal d'shraga. He would not move a lamp like Rabbi Yehuda. So nothing more says, manavshach, what is it your desire? What is it that you hold? Ik Rabbi Yehuda sevirle, if he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, so let Rabbi Yehuda, let him always do like Rabbi Yehuda. And Ik Rabbi Shimon sevirle, if he held like Rabbi Shimon, you're allowed to move it, Rabbi Shimon, let him always do like Rabbi Shimon, and always move it. Says the Gemara, lo Rabbi Shimon sevirle. Truth is that he really held like Rabbi Shimon. And as Rashi proves, because if you would think to answer the opposite, meaning that he really held that it's like Rabbi Yehuda, that it's forbidden, he would not have, as the Gemara is going to answer right now, when he went to Rabbi Shimon Levi, out of his honor, moved it as his opinion like Rabbi Shimon, because you don't do an issa that you hold it forbidden in the place of someone else who holds it permitted, or you hold it permitted, you can be permitted. No, if he held this forbidden, he would never move it. Rather, it's because he really held like Rabbi Shimon. And that's why when he went to Rabbi Shimon Levi, he did like Rabbi Shimon, and he moved it. But Rabbi Shimon Kavai did Rabbi Yechanan because of the honor of Rabbi Yechanan, who, as we mentioned this just before, Rabbi Yechanan held halachas like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds of the muktzah machmas miyas, and who holds of the extensive halacha of muktzah machmas iser, that it was already lit from beforehand. Therefore, he didn't move it simply because of the honor of Rabbi Yechanan. That's why he had the different hanagas. Really, he held like Rabbi Shimon, but when he went to Rabbi Yechanan, who holds like Rabbi Yehuda, therefore he didn't move the lamp that had gone out on Shabbos. Now we continue with a continuation of this theme about the laws of the lamp regarding now muktzah machmas miyas. and continue on this theme about Reb Shimon. Amar Yehuda, Shraga de Mishcha, a lamp that was lit with oil. So Shari little Tula. After it goes out, you're allowed to move it, which is like Reb Shimon, because it's not so disgusting, the lamp, after it's, even though we said a klicheres, an old lamp, Rabbi Yehuda holds a muksmak masmis. It's disgusting, you're not going to use it. But it's not so disgusting. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon does not subscribe to that being forbidden as muktzah, as out of sight, out of mind. No, it's not so muktzah. But this is what Rabbi Yehuda comes to me mechadish. But the nafta, but if let's say it was a lamp with neft, which that type of fuel is foul smelling, even Rabbi Shimon would agree that asal l'taltula, that you're not allowed to move that lamp because it has no utility. No one's going to use it. It's such a disgusting smelling thing. Only for the work. Now, that's a klisha malachta. What's its work? Le'isr. The only thing you're going to do with this is a forbidden thing of lighting it. So even Rabbi Shimon would agree that when it has such a bad odor, that becomes a muktzah item known as a klisha malachta le'isr. It's only used for a prohibited thing, and therefore it would be forbidden to move it on Shabbos. Now, however, that's Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yosef Damatavai, they disagree. They say, no, the nafta namish or l'tatula, that even if it is a lamp of nafta, Rabbi Shimon would permit one to move it. And the Girsa has in parentheses, because it's something that only the Gemara is going to introduce later on, because it does have utility. Because although you're not going to really use any really thing with it, it's still fit to cover a vessel with it. So although you're not going to use it, because it's really, really foul smelling, but it will have some utility, and therefore Rabbi Shimon would hold it's still not muktzah. But the Gemara brings a story to illustrate this halacha. Rav Avya ikle bei Rava. Rav Avya went to the house of Rava, have a me'isen beikare betine. His shoes were filthy with mud. Now, asive apurya. He put his feet on the bed, kamei the Rava, in front of Rava. Now, ikle Rava. Rava was bothered by this because he's making the bed filthy. So, Baila Tzuri, he wanted to bother Rav Avya with questions. Wanted to badger him, this Talmudic style. He wanted to get back at somebody. You can ask him a good kasha, a klutz kasha, because he wanted to get back at him that he's making the bed muddy. So he asked him the following question. What's the reason that both Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, they disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. They say, according to Rabbi Shimon, shrug the nafta, a lamp with a fuel of neft, namishar l'taltula, you're allowed to move it because what do I mean? Why are you allowed to move it? Isn't it klisha malachta l'isa? No one's using it even according to Rabbi Shimon, it should be muktzah because there's no utility whatsoever. It's just made for a prohibited thing, therefore that should be muktzah. So Amalei, so on that Rav Avi said to him, no. It does have utility because you could use it to cover a vessel. Since it has this utility, so therefore it's not going to be totally muktzah according to Rabbi Shimon, and therefore you can move it. On that, Rabbi has a comeback. Says if that's the case, then every rock in the courtyard, which is even a more severe level of muktzah, a rock is like muktzah machmas gufa, has no utility. It's intrinsically a muktzah thing, which everyone agrees is muktzah. Mitaltlin, according to your logic, you should be able to move every rock. What do you mean? You could use it to cover a bottle. Everyone knows you lose the cover, the grape juice. They even made a song out of it. You put a rock on top. That's it. You got a cover. So every rock shouldn't be muktzah according to Rabbi Shimon based on your logic. Amalei, so Rabbi has a comeback. He says, no. This neft lamp, ikater is kliyala. Although it's disgusting and it smells, no one's going to use it for anything. But ultimately, it's a vessel. So it's a vessel. With the fact that it does have some utility that you could use to cover a vessel with it, those two combined will make it non-muktzah for Reb Shimon. But Hani, these rocks, like it turns clearly, and it's not a vessel, it's a rock. And therefore, since it's muktzah machmas gufay, it's not enough to say that it could have utility by covering the cover of the bottle and to go ahead and make it into a non-muktzah item. Therefore, Reb Shimon would agree that it's going to be muktzah over there. As he proves his point, he says, Mili Tanya, didn't we learn in the Brayos as we continue to Beis that hashirim, regarding bracelets, or vanazamim, or nose rings, or tabois, or the regular the finger rings, they're like old vessels. Where you're allowed to move your vessels in the courtyard. What's the chiddush that jewelry could be moved in the courtyard? The chiddush is because actually in Talmudic law, one is forbidden to go out into the public domain to the Rosh Hashanah with their jewelry. Why? The Gemara later on the Nuntes Beis says it's a gzeira because the woman might say, "Oh, I see you got a new ring." Oh, she might take it off, take off the jewelry and show it to a friend, and she's going to come to carry it in Rosh Hashanah. So according to Talmudic law, we'll discuss exactly possibly why today that women do wear their jewelry, but Talmudic law it's forbidden. Now, hence, that should make it, just like we said regarding the idea about the menorah when it falls down, because you might come to make Makam Patish, that the menorah becomes muktzah, so to speak. You can't move it, in the Rabbi Shimon. So here too, that should make the jewelry muktzah, because it's something that's forbidden to be used, because you might come to carry it. Still says the Brisa, no, you're allowed to go ahead and move it around the courtyard. Now, Rama Uli says, Matam, what's the reason? Why isn't it muktzah? It should be muktzah because you're not allowed to wear it. If you come to wear it, you might come to carry it in Shasarabim. So why are you allowed to move it in the courtyard? And this is the idea. And this is what he's bringing a raya from. Because ultimately, the jewelry has a status of a vessel. It's a kli. And therefore you're allowed to move it, like Rashi is not wearing it, because if you wear it, you might come to take it into the Rosh Hashanah, but you're allowed to move it around, because it has a teres kli, so it's not a muktzah thing. Hachanami here also by the neft lamp. Since there's two elements, not just that it's fit to be used to cover the grape juice, to cover the vessel, but it also has a kli on it. Therefore, that's why Rabbi Shimon would agree that you're allowed to move it, not like Rabbi Yehuda, whereas tzrayos, like we said, rocks, although it also can be used to cover the vessel, but it's not a kli, and therefore there Rabbi Shimon would agree that it's going to be muktzah. The Gemara concludes, he says, Baruch Rachmana, Hashem should be blessed, that Rabbi did not embarrass Rav Avia, and he had a good answer to explain that since it's ro l'chasas b'mana, that's why it's not going to be considered muktzah. Now the Gemara continues with another halacha regarding the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, a contradiction, a stira in his halachas regarding muktzah. Because Ramalei Abai l'Rab, Abai posed the following contradiction to Rabbi. He says, on the one hand, these are two very well-known halachas of Rabbi Shimon. Tanya, we learned in the Bryce, we quoted this many times, this idea. The leftover oil in the lamp or in the bowl that was lit, and now it went out on Shabbos. What's the halacha with that oil? So the Tanna Kama, Rabbi Yehuda says, sir, it's forbidden. It was muktzah ben hashmashas, it's muktzah. But Rabbi Shimon matter. Shimon says, no, it's permitted. Now, Alma Rabbi Shimon, so obviously we see according to Rabbi Shimon, we've been saying this all throughout the sugya, Leslie muktzah. It doesn't hold the muktzah. Unless it's something really extreme like muktzah machmas chassan kiss. Rabbi Shimon says, no, not concerned. Who cares that it was lit from before Shabbos? Who cares that it's a little bit disgusting? It's not going to be a problem. You could take the oil. So he doesn't know the muktzah. On the other hand, there seems to be contradicted from a Mishnah Masechtas Beya. The Mishnah there is going on the halacha of a firstborn animal. That it says, Rabbi Shimon he says, Kol she'ein mumay nikar be'erev Yom Tov. If the blemish was not recognizable in the animal from before Yom Tov, which what happens is if it's on Yom Tov, this animal is going to be muktzah because it has to be brought as a carbon, or if there's no base in Mikdash, but still you can't use it for your own personal usage as if it's unblemished. You have to wait till it develops a blemish. So, says Reb Shimon, if it, let's say it has a blemish, but it wasn't recognizable from before Yom Tov, so ein zeh menamuchin. So that means to say that it wasn't prepared. That's the opposite, that's the inverse of muktzah. Muktzah is it's set aside, and muchah means it's prepared. If it wasn't prepared, because I didn't know it had a blemish, so coming into Yom Tov, I didn't know I could use this animal. So Reb Shimon says, it's muktzah. I don't get it. Do you hold the muktzah or you not? Now, Tais has a very important question you have to point out. What do you mean? The reason why Reb Shimon holds that you can't use that animal in Yom Tov is not because of muktzah. If anyone remembers Masechtas Be'ach of Hema Beis, Reb Shimon is coming from a whole different halacha. It's because you cannot. It's like a law of judging. You can't look at blemishes on Yom Tov, because actually Rabbi Yehuda, who's more stringent in muktzah, actually holds that you're allowed to go ahead and see that blemish and then slaughter it. So how can you say it's because of the laws of muktzah? So, but that says Taisus that the Gemara is being medayik, that the words don't say, Rabbi Shimon says forbidden because you cannot see blemishes on Yom Tov. That would sound like, yeah, only look at Chili camp, but yeah, but if you checked, okay, fine, we don't have muktzah. From the fact that you use the words ein zeh menamuchen, it sounds like not only that you can't check it, but because of that it's going to be muktzah. That even if you check it, it's not going to be a valid checking. That's a contradiction. Do you hold that it's going to be muktzah? Or what's with the previous halacha, like you said, the leftover oil? No, it's not a problem on muktzah. Says the Gemara, Hashi, can you compare the two halachas? Hasam, which refers to over here our discussion regarding leftover oil. Adam yeshiv mitzapa. Person sits and he waits. When's the candle, the Shabbos candle is going to go out? That I could use the leftover oil. So therefore, he's not what's called mekatza medaita. He doesn't totally set it aside from his intention of using it, because he thinks, okay, it's going to go out at some point, and I'll be able to use the oil I want to use. So therefore, we can understand why according to Shimon it's not going to be considered muktzah. In the contrast, Hacha over here regarding the laws of his animal of Bechor, what do you think? Adam Yeshiv Mitzabah. You think a person sits and he waits, Masa Yipa B'mum, when is there going to fall a blemish on my animal? Oh, I'll be able to use it on Yom Tov? No, a person doesn't anticipate that. Why not? Because Meimah Arma, he tells himself, Mi Yema Denafla Meimuma. Who says he's going to develop a blemish? In other words, by the candle, at some point it's going to go out. So he's hoping that when it goes out, he'll have some leftover oil. Here, who says he's going to develop a blemish? And even if he says it's going to develop a blemish, who says it's going to be a permanent blemish? To permit the animal, it can't be what's called a mum over, passing blemish. It has to be a permanent blemish. And even if it's going to have a real whack, it's going to have a real permanent blemish, who says that he's going to find a sage that's going to be available for him on Yom Tov to see if it's a permanent blemish or not? So that's why, according to Rabbi Shimon, it's going to be muktzah. Now, Tosfos just points out, importantly, that it doesn't mean you have to have all these miyamers. Even one miyamer, even just one who said, is enough to say that the person's not going to sit and anticipate it, and therefore that's why you understand over there it's going to be muktzah. Even according to Rabbi Shimon, because he's not sitting and waiting. He has no clue. He doesn't think it's necessarily going to happen. Now, but on this interpretation, Masav Rami Bar Chama, as from a Mishnah later on for Koftan Zayin Amud Aleph, the Mishnah tells us that Mefirin Nidar, a husband is allowed to be mefer, nullify the vow of his wife, b'Shabbos on Shabbos. The reason why he could do that is because he has a limitation of 24 hours to nullify. If he doesn't do it now, the wife's ned is going to stay forever. So because of that, we let him nullify in all situations her vow on Shabbos. Now, so too, v'nish'al l'nedarm, you're allowed to go at it in two ways of being made for a neder for a woman. One's her husband, and one is going to ask a sage to be what's called be matter the neder. He thinks about it and he says, oh, was that your intention originally? No, okay. And those nedarim you're allowed to do shein l'tzarech Shabbos. If it's at least a Shabbos need, because matter neder you can do whenever you want. It's not limited to a 24-hour thing. So you're not really doing Shabbos. Only if it's a Shabbos need. For example, let's say she took a vow. I'm not eating today. You got to eat the cholent. You got to eat the suda. So then you're allowed to go to this age and be matter the neder. Fine. Okay, that will get around the problem about being mefer or matter in the Dharma Shabbos. But on that, as Rami Bar Chama, he says, wait, I got a different problem over here. But Vamai, why is she permitted to eat the Shabbos Suda? Even if her husband is what's called made for the neder, it should still be a problem about muktzah, because she removed her intention. She thought she's not eating anything for Shabbos anymore. Why? Lema, we should say, mi yemer, who said the mizdakag global, that her husband is going to go and give her the time of day and be made for her neder. So you should say that she also was makatza medaita, just like Reb Shimon said regarding the bechar, who said a sage is going to go ahead and be available for me. As Tosfos points out, why wouldn't the husband be available for the wife? Is because many times he doesn't want to be. Because sometimes she makes a neder to fulfill dvar mitzvah, and he doesn't want to nullify. So who said he has the frame of mind to go ahead and analyze today and be made for a neder? Maybe he's not going to. And therefore, you should say miyemer, which, why are we saying that she could eat the Shabbos food, they be made for the neder? It should be muktzah. You should say the same svar you said regarding bechar. So the Gemara, no, Hasam over there is Kedrav Pinchas. Mishmei derab. Because Amar Pinchas Mishmei derab, he says, Kol nederes. Any woman that makes a vow, al das bailahi nederes, she makes it with the intention of her husband, meaning on the condition that her husband's okay with it. And she relies on him that he's going to go ahead and give her the time of day on the day that he hears it. And if not, it's not going to be a neder, and therefore he could be made for neder because it is totally dependent on him. And therefore, it's not going to be a neder if he wouldn't give her the time of day, and therefore, it's not going to be considered as muktzah. But the Gemara says, Tashma, another difficulty from that same Mishnah, the Seif of the Mishnah, which we quoted. The Mishnah said, okay, but Nishalm, you could go ahead and also ask a sage, l'nedarim, for vows, shal tzarech Shabbos, which have a Shabbos need, b'Shabbos on Shabbos. The question is, but v'amai, why? Lema, you should say, miyemin de mizdakig lechacham. Same thing as by the bechar. Who said that a sage is going to give the time of day? The rabbanim are backed up. There's no time. Who said it's going to happen? So why are we saying that she could eat the food through matan neder? Let's say her husband's not around anymore, so she has to go to the sage to be matan neder. No one can be made for her neder. But why are you saying that if he ends up doing it's mutter, it should be muktzah, it should be a miyemer, just like you said by bechar? Says Gemara, no, it's different. Hasam over there by the vows, by a neder. Let's say she can't get a hold of a sage. It's sufficient with 3 common people. You can get 3 people. I don't know if they can be on their porches, but you can get 3 people to sit in the bezdin, and therefore she thinks even if I can't get a sage, I'll get 3 people, and therefore it's not going to be out of sight, out of mind. In contrast to Hacha over here by the bechar, who said that she's going to get a sage because by the bechar, by the firstborn animal, commoners are not allowed to, even after the fact, go ahead and permit the mum and the bechar, only like Rashi and Tosfos both discuss, which is a full-fledged, obvious blemish, like missing a limb. then 3 commoners. But if not, you cannot have a 3 hedyatis doing it, and therefore, by the neder, we say that since it's easy to find 3 hedyatis, not muktzah and conscious to bechar, where you need a chacham, there it's going to be muktzah. Now, the Gemara continues, another contradiction in the opinion of Reb Shimon. Rami le Abai Rabbi Yosef. Abai asked another contradiction, this time to Rabbi Yosef. He says, Miyam Reb Shimon, another famous halacha we were talking about in Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph. Does Reb Shimon really say, he said like this, he said, Kavsa, when the lamp goes out on Shabbos, mutal taltla, says you're allowed to move it. Not like all the other opinions who said, oh, it was lit by Ben Hashmashas, Migidis Katsoy Ben Hashmashas, Katsoy L'Kuliyim, was Muktzah Machmasisser. Says, no, it's out now. Says a regular lamp, you're allowed to move it. Now, we had made the diak all along, okay, that Kavsa in. If the lamp goes out, then he holds, and this is what his son Rabbi Elazar Shimon was, what we said was more lean. We said then that we're going to interpret over here, this is that place. Kavsa in, we said, okay, when it goes out, that's when you're allowed to move it. Loi kavsa loi. But if it didn't go out, you're not allowed to move it, which Tosfos says this is how the Gemara sometimes does it. Although it could have said from the Reisha says explicitly, chutz min haner delik b'Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon says straight up, he says you're allowed to move any ner except for the one that's lit on Shabbos. And here it's going from the Sefer, it's being medayik from it and saying, oh, when it goes out, then you're allowed to then you're allowed to move it. But if it didn't go out, then you're not allowed to, when the Reisha says explicitly. But Tosfos says that's how the Gemara often does it. But one thing is that we see if it didn't go out, if it's lit, according to Rabbi Shimon, he would agree you're not allowed to move the lamp. Now, my time, what would be the reason? What's the problem? It doesn't hold of muktzah. What's the problem when it's lit? Why is it that when it's lit, when it's not lit? So, says the Gemara, Dilma Bahadi did not. What's the problem? Because maybe as you're moving it, so you're going to put out. That's a problem. You might come to extinguish it. You can't move it when it's lit. You see it suddenly shaking, and then suddenly the thing goes out. So therefore, that's where he would agree that you're not allowed to move the lamp. On that, the difficulty is such a mean Rabbi Shimon Dama, but we know Rabbi Shimon holds Davish Miskaven is mutter. As long as it's not inevitable. If you didn't intend to, even if it happens, it's permitted to do something that's going to be a malach if you're not intending to do it. The time like we learned in the Brayis, Rabbi Shimon he says, there's also another famous halacha Rabbi Shimon we always quote, Ger Adam Kisi Mita B'Savsa. A person could drag a bed, a chair, a bench, as long as he does not intend to make a ditch, a groove. So even though he's making chayrish, he's plowing, but that's not your intention, so that's permitted. So wait a second. On the one hand, you're telling me that he holds that you're not allowed to move a lit lamp because maybe as you're moving it might come to extinguish. Now that's not his intention. That's davashay miskaven, and you tell me he's going to hold that it's going to be usher, but he holds davashay miskaven as mutter, like you see that you can move the bench. How do we resolve these two different opinions? So on that says the Gemara like this: Kol heicha dechi mechaven. Wherever if you would intend to do something, ikke isur deraisa, there would be a biblical violation. By the case of the lamp, if you extinguish it, so that's kibui, that's an av malacha, that's an issa deraisa, which actually Tosfos points out it actually shouldn't be a malacha deraisa according to Reb Shimon. Because besides being what we're calling, that we're discussing davashay maskaven, there's another concept, what's called malacha shein tzurich legufa. You don't need it for it itself. You don't need the extinguishing. Every extinguishing essentially is makalkal. It's only if you need it, let's say, for the wick itself. So Tosfos explains, you have to say he's talking about such a case where if you had in mind that it would be issa deraisa, like for example the wick, that you want to singe the wick, which then makes it into a good wick, you actually have to light it and then put it out. Now, although Tosfos says that's a doichik teretz, but it says anyways the Gemara is going to ask on this interpretation. But for now, be that as it may, the Gemara is assuming that if this went out, this would be the malacha deraisa of extinguishing. Oh, so therefore, kiloi mechaven, even when you're not intending, like when you just want to move it, goes Reb Shimon Rabban, you're right, then Reb Shimon is geyser, davish emeskaven, to be aser. Because even though you're not intending to, but if you would intend, it would be malacha deraisa. Okay, then we make exed Rabban, and we don't let you do it even when you're not intending it. But kol heicha dechi mechaven, but whatever, if you would intend, it would only be ikka isur drabanan. Why? When you drag the chair, even if you did that intentionally, that would not be isur deraisa. Why not? Why isn't this chayrish? Why isn't this plowing? The reason is because it's plowing in the indirect way. Because when the Gemara tells us later on that plowing is a chayfer, digging is a tolah, the derivative of chayrish, of plowing, that's only if you plow in the normal way. With a hoe, with a hatchet, with the tools, usually, you don't usually take a bench. That would be pretty creative to go ahead and dig a ditch and plow like that. You don't usually do it. So even if you did intentionally, it would only be an issa d'Rabbanan. That's where we find kilei mechaven. When you're not intending to do it, sure, you permit you even initially to do that. Because like in the case of dragging the bench, because even if you did intentionally, it would be only Issa D'Rabbanan. But in our case, yes, he says you're not allowed to move the lamp because even though it's Davar Shein Miskaven, but we say Midrabanan it's going to be Asa because if you did intentionally, it would be an Issa D'Oraisa. However, says the Gemara, Masav Rava. Rava, however, asks on this interpretation of Mishnah Masechtas Klein. The Mishnah says, as we quoted this Mishnah previously, Meicher Ksus, those who sell garments, Meicher Kedarkan, they could sell their clothing in the normal manner, which is that even if it's made out of Klein, he could wear it and he could show it off in the street. People say, "Ooh, that's a nice suit. What is that?" Say, "Oh, you want? Come over here into this store. I'll be able to give you. We'll suit you up right now. Let's take your measurements." So you could wear it, even though it's shatnez, as the Mishnah says, l'vachli iskaven, as long as you don't have intent, b'chama b'ne'achama, in the sun to protect yourself from the heat, or in the winter from the winter elements. Now, obviously, this Mishnah is like Rabbi Shimon, from the fact that you're going based on intent. According to Rabbi Yehuda, I don't care, Davar Shein Miskaven, you're intending or not intending. Ultimately, you're having benefit from the shatnez. You're wearing the shatnez, it would be forbidden. But obviously, it's like Rabbi Shimon who says, no, if it's Ein Miskaven, you're not intending to have benefit from the shatnez, it's going to be permitted. Now, but continues the Mishnah. But the discreet ones, the people that are very makbid in halacha, mafshilim b'makal acharein. They don't wear the suit. They hang the suit from a stick behind themselves, and that's how they walk out into the street to showcase their suits. Now, says the Gemara, in this halacha, the chi mechaven, when you're intending to have enjoyment from this shatnez suit, isur deraisa, that's a biblical violation of shatnez. Yet still we see kiloi mechaven, if you're not intending to have benefit. Sure, Rabbi Shimon, like Rabbi Shimon initially allows you to go ahead and do it. Second, why are you allowed to do that? You told me when if you would have kavanah to be issa deraisa, Rabbi Shimon is goyzer davar shein miskaven azasa. How are you allowed to wear it even when you're not intending to have benefit? But it could come to issa deraisa when you have kavanah. So obviously, El Amar Rava, rather Rava says, as we continue to Mem Zayin Menalv, that you're right. Hanach lener shem the besila, leave alone the lamp, the oil, the wick. Ha'il denasa basis ledavar ha'asa. That's for a different reason, because it's a base for a prohibited thing. What is it a base for? It's a base for the flame. Such a muktzah as a flame, Reb Shimon agrees that the vessel becomes secondary to the flame when it's in it. So it's not because he's concerned for extinguishing. No, he doesn't care if it goes out. Even if it goes out, it's davar shein miskaven. It's not intending. For that alone, it would be permitted. This is what we say that we're going to change the interpretation that we originally said from the Daf Mago. That's not as concerned. Kol zman she'ner their leg. So who cares? It sounds like that song. But you could be masakin kol zman she'ner their leg. But no, that's not the reason why you can't move it. The reason why you can't move it is because this is a basis l'davar ha'aser. And Shimon agrees, a flame is considered a muksa thing, and this is secondary because it's a base. Now, Taisa just says something very interesting. It says, why do you have to say, leave alone the lamp, the oil, and the wick? Why does he have to talk about, we're just talking about moving the lamp. Why does he have to say the oil is also a basis of dava asa? Why does he have to say that's muksa? Because if not, and this is just important for halacha, then actually it would not be forbidden to move the lamp. Why not? Isn't it a basis for the flame? Because then there would be a base for something that's forbidden, which is the flame, and for something that's permitted, which is the oil. And actually, as the Gemara is going to tell us in the next step, actually would be permitted. Because it'd be basis l'dava asa u'l'dava mutter. So that's why it says hanach l'ner shem l'psila. They're all a basis to the flame, which is the primary thing of what you have over here. And that's why it's going to be aser. Again, a totally different halacha. Therefore, it's not difficult on Rabbi Shimon because yes, as davar shein miskaven itself would not be a problem. It's a problem because of the halachas of basis. Some of this we discussed in today's daf and Shabbos Daf Memvav. We continued the discussion from the previous daf that we said that according to Rabbi Yochanan, everyone, even Reb Shimon, agrees that it's forbidden to move a menorah. According to Shlakish, it's only if it's that a big one that it needs two hands. Said the Gemara, why? Why would Reb Shimon agree? Reb Shimon doesn't hold a muktzah, and that's why we said you couldn't learn that from the story of the menorah. Because, as the Gemara originally said, because a person is kaveh makom, he said at a place, so that even Reb Shimon would agree is like some form of muktzah. It's set aside. And that's where our Gemara continues to ask a question from the bridal canopy, which it has a permanent place, and yet still you see a lot of move it, you're allowed to put it up, take it down on Shabbos. So though there's no problem about binyan and stira, and that's why it says permitted, but why isn't it should be problematic as muktzah because it's kaveh makom. So therefore the Gemara gives a different interpretation. The reason why menorah everyone agrees is because you're talking about a menorah. First, the Gemara said made out of sections. Then we said, why would Reish Lakish disagree? No, it's a menorah that's like sectional. What does that mean? That there's chidki, that there are grooves. So, because like we said, if it was sectional, it would always be aser, because that's a concern that it might fall, and you might, quote, make a vessel when you fix it, which is called makeh b'patish, and therefore, that everyone agrees when it's sectional, it's aser. The discussion was regarding if it was that of chidki, of the grooves. So when it's large, that let's say it needs two hands to hold it, yeah, everyone agrees it's going to be aser, because people might think that it's sectional, because generally large ones are sectional. But the machlekes was regarding a small one, which is like what we call, you could hold in one hand. Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish had the machlekes. And the machlekes was, do we make a gezerah atu that of chalias, that if we let you use a small one that's grooved, you might come to use a small one of sectional, which is a problem. That was the machlekes. But again, there was a totally different halacha regarding confusing it with chulias, which chulias is the problem of makapatis. But again, that's why it had nothing to do, even if Shimon could agree to that halacha, has nothing to do with the halacha of muktzah. And therefore, although in that story that his student had not moved the menorah, that doesn't prove that he held like a Yehuda. But the Gemara goes back to what was the previous Gemara's discussion, which Rabbi Yechanan did say halacha is like a Yehuda. That the Gemara says, how could he say halacha is like a Yehuda? That what's called islay muktzah, he holds of the extensive halachas of muktzah, machmas miyas, machmas iser. How could you say that? But there's a Stam Mishnah which Rabbi Yechanan rules like that we mentioned in the previous Daf, that's meduyik like Reb Shimon, not like Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because we see that you don't say migidis katzai, which had the money on the muchni. We said if it's not on there right now, you're allowed to move it. Why are you allowed to move it? Migidis katzai. So it's like Reb Shimon. Wait a second. But then if you have a Stam Mishnah like Reb Shimon, why are you ruling Rabbi Yehuda? So what you have to say is that it shouldn't destruct the halach of Rabbi Yechanan, that Mishnah was that it wasn't money on it to hold bein hashmashas. When it says that there's no money on it right now, you're allowed to move it, it doesn't mean right now, it means it wasn't on bein hashmashas. Because if it was on bein hashmashas, that Mishnah would be telling us it would be aser, which would be like Reb Yehuda. And therefore that's why Rabbi Yechanan could rule the halach is like Reb Yehuda. Then we went to halach of Rebbe. He said this statement. This was what was quoted. Hayer b'menorah k'Reb Shimon b'ner. Now, the Gemara does not resolve, whoops, we just went to eraser mode. That the Gemara doesn't say regarding what was he saying. Was he saying one teaching, which is, he was teaching a heter by menorah. He was permitting by menorah, just like, which I have to find difficult, like Reb Shimon permits by ner, like he's just comparing it, or was it actually two different teachings? He was saying that, no, it's actually, he ruled by menorah, period. So this would be like, that has a period, which is aser. And then, like Reb Shimon by ner, that he ruled like Reb Shimon, that it is permitted to move an old lamp. Now, why would it be aser to move the menorah? Is like we said, because it's talking about chidki, which is grooves, and we're concerned because you might come to use the sectional one. So that was, the Gemara doesn't resolve what is Rebbe's opinion. Then the Gemara brings many different stories regarding Amiram that were bothered that others had moved it because they had like Rabbi Yehuda. Then we had Machlekes Amiram regarding the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, if he agrees by a ner of neft, if it's muktzah. So although generally he doesn't hold that a neft is going to be considered as muktzah, somebody that's smelly, it doesn't hold the muktzah machmas miyas. But here on the other hand, you might say it's a klisha malachti le'isser because the only utility is for the lighting, which is for the isser. That's the malachta is le'isser because it's so foul smelling. So maybe you would say that we agree that it's muktzah. Or do you say that no, that ultimately it does have utility to cover a vessel, and therefore it's not going to be muktzah. Now, if that's a reason, so what's with every rock? Every rock should be considered also not as muktzah. No, because there's no teres kli on it. It has to have both elements. It has to have a teres kli, and it has to have some utility. Just like we find by the rings that you're allowed to move in the courtyard, because it has a status of kli on them, and therefore you're allowed to move them, even though they should also be muktzah, because you're now taking it into the street, but still we see if it has a teres kli, you're allowed to move it. Then we had a contradiction in the halacha of Reb Shimon regarding muktzah. On the one hand, we know Reb Shimon permits the leftover oil in the ner, because he doesn't hold the muktzah. On the other hand, by the laws of a b'chair, he says if the blemish was not recognizable from Erev Yom Tov, it's not prepared, it's muktzah. I don't get it, but you don't hold up that something wasn't designated should be muktzah. Why is it different? So he says, no, it's different. Because by oil, a person sits and waits. He knows it's going to go out at some point. He's going to hope there's going to be some left over, so he's waiting and he's looking. But by the Bechor, who said? Who says it's going to develop a blemish? Who said it's going to be a permanent blemish? Who says it's going to get a sage? And so on and so forth. And therefore there, Reb Shimon would agree that it's going to be muktzah, as we learned in the Mishnah in Masechtas Beya. Now, in contrast, a husband to be made for the neder of his wife, that it's not muktzah. Why not? Maybe my husband's not going to give me the time of day. No, because her whole neder is dependent on her husband. So to the sage, he could be mater neder, because maybe he's not going to be available. Yeah, but then it would be enough with gimel hadyotis and contrast to bechor, which needs a chacham. So there it's going to be muktzah, but the other ones, you're anticipating waiting, therefore it's not going to be muktzah. We had another contradiction in Reb Shimon. On the one hand, he says that if it didn't go out, the ner, then you're not allowed to move it. Why? What would be the difference if it's lit? Is because obviously because it might go out. Wait a second, but we know that he quotes by dragging the bench that he holds that that's permitted because it's davar she'emes kaven, it's not intended. So here it's also not intended. So how do we understand it? So we said you cannot differentiate, the Gemara had attempted to, you cannot differentiate, because by the putting out the candle by mistake, which that's a biblical concern. So therefore, even davar she'emes kaven is usher in contrast to dragging the bench, which is only rabbinic, because it's kalach yad. No, because by klayim, which is also biblical, and still he permits you likatchila when you're not intending to have benefit from it. So you see, he doesn't differentiate. Even by deraisa, he permits davar she'emes kaven. So rather, the Gemara concludes, Hanach ner shemen psila. Why over there does Reb Shimon hold that you can't move it? You can't move when it's lit. Why not? That's for a different reason. Because it's a basis. It's a base, the davar ha'asr, which is the shalheves, and it's not because it's concerned to keep it. Because of that, davar she'emes kaven is going to be mutter. Here it's because the halacha, basel davar asr, you're right, it itself is not muktzah, but it's a base for the flame, which is muktzah, which Reb Shimon would agree, and therefore, that's why he holds that you can't move it when it's lit, simply because the laws of the basis. Thank you to any time for hosting us.